This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask with your host, Dr. Judith Briles, on the Rockstar Radio Network. On the show today, you'll find out where book publishing is going and how to take advantage of it. How to identify and avoid publishing predators. What opportunities are emerging as the book trade evolves in new forms. How to avoid losing money, and much, much more. Join us now as a variety of publishing pros will deliver insights and strategies to take the author to the next level of publishing. It's your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. Brought to you by Author U and the Book Shepherd on the Rockstar Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Well, top of a fabulous day. Summer continues to march on, and we are getting so many questions about printing, from formats, from types, to paper, to covers, that I decided it would be really a great show to just focus exclusively on printing. And who best to have as our expert is one of our sponsors, which is Color House Graphics, and certainly one of the go-to printers I go to for all of our clients at the Book Shepherd to get quotes. And it's not that we always Color House always gets them, because we do comparisons, because one of the things that we're going to get into is sometimes one printer is better for one type of a book than another printer. And Phil Knight, who is going to be my expert guest, is the Director of Sales at Color House Graphics, Inc. CHG is a book manufacturer that exists to help publishers, authors, and companies create and deliver great books. Phil has many years in printing sales, marketing, and manufacturing throughout within the book industry. He's one of those go-to people that you can find to give you really solid, practical guidance, which is what I want for all of our authors. He brings experience and perspective to the key functions within the printing industry. You can reach him at pknight, K-N-I-G-H-T, pknight at colorhousegraphics.com, and certainly on the colorhousegraphics.com website. You can query through there. So, Phil, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Judith. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Phil also gives little tips throughout the year, little 3-4 minute tips of the how-to. So I decided we would be just a giant tip today, and that there are a lot of changes. You know, and Phil and I have known each other for maybe 20 years. Phil, is that about right?
I believe it. At least 20 years, Judith.
Yeah, close to it. When I really started, and 20 years ago, I really believed, no, I'm going to back it up. It's probably closer to 15 years, because I created Mile High Press in 2000. And that's when I really started figuring out this thing about book publishing, where that when you really took total control, when you really learned about the business of book, when you went out and got your own bids, when you figured out bringing out your graphics together and your cover designers and your interior designers, and you could get national distribution for your books, which is none of those myths that's out there that people believe that you have to be with a major publisher to get national distribution, and that's all pooey. That you start learning about book manufacturers, these people who actually can take your files and convert them and create the books that you hold in your hand. And they are the binders, the printers, the dust jackets for cover hardcovers. They get all the different options for covers. So we're going to get into all of that today. And Phil's and Color House Graphics is really one of just a few dozen now in North America. Phil, do you know the exact number of how many full book manufacturers there are?
I think the number is about 21 now. It's changing. The number is getting somewhat smaller, but I think it depends on who you count in that list. There are some who produce books on a part-time basis, or they include it within their other range of services, but may not be truly a full-service book manufacturer. So your list, refined a little bit, is probably in the 10 to 15 range.
All right. Well, let's. Why don't we just identify? Because when I was in this, even 5, maybe 6 years ago, I would say there's like 35 full book manufacturers.
Oh, yeah.
What is a full book manufacturer? Why don't we start there?
Well, the answer to that question changes as well. What we normally consider a full-service book manufacturer is one who provides full printing and binding services, not just printing and outsourcing the binding or some other part of the manufacturing process. But typically, it'll be turnkey from files to finished books. And now what we're seeing, and this is true of maybe the top tier of book manufacturers, they're offering a number of other services, including warehousing, fulfillment, ebook conversions, design, even distribution into the market. We're seeing that now being offered by a number of other manufacturers, including ourselves. So the list of services keeps changing, and I think we keep evolving with the way that publishing and self-publishing in particular has evolved.
Mm-hmm. Well, Phil, when I think about having the ability to have your files delivered to one spot, to have all binding done, to get your proofs from one spot, to get all the binding done from one spot, to get your cover done without getting it outsourced, it just seems to make sense to me, if all possible, if you can keep it under one roof, that there is a higher efficiency factor and maybe cost factor. Reduce cost?
Absolutely. No, it's absolutely true that that the integrity of the entire project is improved by having it stay in one place. You have control over it. You do have, you know what your costs are. You know what the timetables are. If it's handed off in different directions, it's difficult to keep control of it. And, so often now, deadlines are critical, whether it's a promotion date, a book signing. There's no room for anything not happening when it's promised. So having the project under one roof with one point of contact, I think is very important today, and especially for those who are the do-it-yourself or self-publisher who really, needs and depends upon the book manufacturer for their experience.
And that is critical. And I know that one of the things that I go out, sometimes when I have a tight turnaround for a book, I know I really need it, I will put it out on a bid saying, and you and I have one we're working on right now, in fact, we're tap dancing on, that we had to have that book going by a certain date. And when I put out for bids, that it came down to 3 people, then it was 2 people, and it was, could you meet this date? And CHG was the one that said, yes, we can ship these by the 20th, or maybe before. And it was, when you're talking really a full-born 3-week turnaround for high quality, I think that's pretty good. Now, Phil, why don't we, and we'll come back to that particular book, but why don't we start on this path? Why don't we take me through the journey that happens, and why don't we start with, how in the heck do you select a particular vendor to work with?
Well, if we're out looking for a vendor, we're looking for somebody who can produce top-notch quality, because there may be several places for us to choose from for a particular service. Let's just take special cover treatments, for instance, where there's embossing or foil stamping involved. Now, we know that that's a particular expertise that experience plays into greatly. So we do a very careful job of vetting that particular vendor or vendors, make sure that we see samples, make sure that they are reliable, that they do what they say they're going to do, and consistently. So we're very careful. We try to get them involved too in the project very early. For instance, got a client now that is asking for some interior pages to be foil stamped, which is a little bit unusual to see text pages.
Sounds expensive.
So
Sounds expensive.
And we haven't gotten to that point yet. But one of the things that we're going to ask the client is to provide us a peek at the artwork so that we can share that with our vendor and make sure that they're comfortable with it. And if they are, then we'll work on the cost side of it. But, we're looking for expertise on all ends. And a vendor can, a special outsource like this can be very critical to the outcome of a book and, quite frankly, can be the linchpin for getting it done on time.
All right. Yeah,
so
and
those are things that we look for.
Okay, Phil, you mentioned foil stamp. A lot of our people who are listening may not even know what that means. So why don't we describe? Well, let me just give an example. I have a book that we actually did with another printer for the first few runs. We did a foil stamp and embossed on top of it. And it was very jazzy. And after multiple prints, I took it to Phil and I said, here's what we're doing. And he said, if you do this kind of little switch, you could save about $1,000. It came down to Phil about $1,000 on this fifth print run you were doing. And we really looked at it closely and we decided, we didn't need the high glossy foil that it had a silver foil, that Phil came up with an alternative that we substituted in, and you know what? It was good enough. So what he's talking about is, though, before we describe really what all this foil is that when you're working closely, and when we come back, we actually have 1 minute to our first break here, but when you are working with someone like Phil, who is very articulate and knowledgeable in the what's going on in printing, and actually you show him, this is what my cover looks like, this is what we're working with, you know what? These printers will come up with some ideas that maybe you haven't thought of. And maybe some bells and whistles.
Judith, one of the first things I'm going to ask is how the books are being sold. Because if it's an online sale, chances are they're not even, obviously not even able to pick the book up and even notice that it has embossing or foil stamping.
Great. We're going to come right back.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these on the Rockstar Radio Network.
Is there a book in you or another? Author U will show you how to create, develop, and publish your book without being hoodwinked. If you already have a book out, you'll find a supportive and brainstorming community that's connected and creative no matter where you live. Author U brings in national experts for its book camps and annual author extravaganza held each May. It has regular meetings and delivers webinars for its members on timely topics. Through Author U's extensive network, members enjoy exclusive benefits, including significant discounts for a variety of services necessary to publishing. The Resource, its online book publishing news magazine, is content-heavy and it's free. If you want to create a book that has pizzazz, punch, and panache, Author U is for you. If you're a hobbyist or a casual author, it's not. Join Author U today through its website at authoru.org. Follow Author U on Twitter at AuthorU and on Facebook at Author U, where timely author and publishing tips and articles are posted daily. Author U, where the author goes to become seriously successful.
Do you sell stuff? Do you want to sell books? Lots of them? If yes, you must take credit cards, the most widely used form of payment today. The Free Terminal has created a special program for your guide to book publishing listeners. No contract. All equipment is free. Extremely low rates and no termination fees ever. Contact Alan Dean at alan@thefreeterminal.com or call him at 303-668-6828. The Free Terminal has handled all credit card transactions for both Author You and Judith for over a year. Don't wait another day. Contact Alan at thefreeterminal.com or call 303-668-6828 and tell him you want the no-contract Author You deal.
Every picture tells a story. And it's a truism that people do judge a book by its cover. Nick Sellinger and NZ Graphics have been in the business of producing superior graphic cover design and interior layout for self-published authors, independent and traditional publishers for years. He has developed a reputation for excellent work, fast turnarounds, and best of all, affordable pricing. NZ Graphics also produces ebooks and book marketing materials such as posters, sell sheets, postcards, bookmarks, business cards, logos, and more. Books designed for his clients have won multiple book awards, including Best Book Award by U.S. Book News, multiple Evie Awards from the Colorado Independent Publishers Association, Indie Book Awards, the San Francisco Book Festival Award, and Freedom Medal Award from Valley Forge. Visit www.nzgraphics.com or call 303-985-4174 for more details about making your book the success it should be. Mention that you are an FOJ, friend of Judith's, and that you heard about NZ Graphics on your guide to book publishing.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask on the Rockstar Radio Network. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Book printing. When do you start engaging a printer? Is it after it's all done and you just want to push the button and print me copies? Do you engage a printer? Do you just go about doing print on demand? What do you do? Well, with us is Phil Knight. He is the Director of Sales for Color House Graphics, one of the sponsors of your Guide to Book Publishing. And we're actually talking about, he brought up a situation before the break about someone who wanted to do a foil. And I don't know if it was embossing as well on the interior. And I have to tell you, Phil, now I'm thinking about, so what's the back side of that page going to look like? And I'm not so sure unless we're going to double it up, because either you're going to miss all that printing because it's going to look pretty saucy on that.
Yeah,
so,
well, in this case, it was just flat foil stamp. But nevertheless, you know, when you're stamping on some substrates, it doesn't work real well, so we're really interested in learning more before we commit. But as it pertains to this customer, we're going to get an opinion from the vendor first, and then we'll maybe even do some testing if that's the case.
Which would make
right.
sense.
And that's right. And that's an idea. I don't think it's a new idea for sure, but so often I encounter folks who are they want to see samples, they want to see samples of our work, which is fine, but it never absolutely represents what they're going to do. So quite often we'll suggest taking a portion of their files and actually test printing or even mocking up a book just so they can see and feel and get a sense for what the paper is like, for the size. It just helps, I think, the do-it-yourselfer to get a better understanding, and maybe they even share it with folks they consider as part of their market to get some feedback. So I wouldn't hesitate if I were to suggest to those out there who are at that stage of doing some marketing tests and deciding what to do, to ask the printer about the possibility of of actually getting a physical piece produced. You know, most of us today in that group of book manufacturers that we started to talk about have digital printing capabilities, you know, short run. So it is practical now to go out and produce a copy or two and mock it up and send it back and have our customer take a look. There's nothing like having your hand on the actual piece.
All right, and Phil, so if you do that, is this going to have, like, I know what it costs to get a proof copy. I mean, I've had actually a couple of proof copies this past week from you on books, and I caught something. You know, I caught some. I mean, this is the last chance. We need to get into proof copies, but that I caught something that had been on the original bid, and somehow it got overlooked, so we were able to catch it quickly and fix it before you pushed the magic button and kicked out 2,000 copies of it.
Exactly. So, well, what I'm actually speaking about, Judith, is a step before we even get the project ready for print. You know, early on into the concept stage or even the file preparation stage, we were asked about print quality when it comes to full color. You know, what will my book look like when it's printed on your paper? Well, I can't replicate that any better than to take a portion of their file and actually output some onto the paper that we will eventually print on, and have them see an example of it. That's the time to address that before we get to the actual live project ready for print.
All right, and what would that cost, Phil, to do? So you're talking about just not printing the whole book, but just a portion of it would contain all the elements of what will be carried throughout the book. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, generally it depends on how far we have to take it. But if it's just a few pages, I usually consider that part of, if there's a strong commitment that we're going to produce the book and the client is really, focused on working for a solution with us, then I usually will not assess a charge for that. If we get into a full-blown test print, we have to put it on a large format press, then that can vary anywhere from $100 to $400. But again, what we're trying to get at here is we want to succeed the first time. We want the expectations to be in place. The goal here is to have a smooth transition from files to print, and so we're going to assess that early on and make sure that if there's a lack of experience sensed here, and maybe it's a photographer that knows what they want, but they can't be sure until they see what we can do. So those are just decisions that are made on the fly sometimes when we're in discussions with our clients. And I would say that most of our colleagues out there in the print industry, book printing, think in a similar manner. In today's world, we're not dealing with seasoned print buyers in every case. We've got folks that are excellent writers and publishers, but they aren't quite there yet, and they're relying on others to help them make print decisions and manufacturing decisions. So, it's our goal is to avoid surprises and make it a great experience for them.
Right, and as you know, we've had a few surprises with some of the people.
There are some that are unavoidable, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, some of them are avoidable, though, if all the players had their cards in the deck at the right time.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so let's bring it around to first of all, Phil, I don't want to leave the foil. Would you describe what foil is?
Yeah, thanks. What we're talking about when we talk about foil is a metallic, sometimes just a flat color that is stamped or transferred from a roll of material that when applied to paper, and usually a cover, it gives a sheen or a metallic-like look. In the case of instances where we use metallic gold or silver. We apply pressure onto usually a copper or magnesium die. We stamp that image, whatever the artwork is, onto the surface of the paper. It releases that foil and makes that area that is where it's applied stand out with a high luster metallic look. And usually, that adds some cost. Depends on the length of the print run. But usually we don't see that treatment used until we get over 1,000 copies. It gets a little bit prohibitive when we get into short runs. And again, I go back to how the book is being sold. If it's an online sale, chances are it won't make a difference. The buyer is not able to pick it up and look at it. They're making a decision based on perhaps a web page or a thumbnail of that cover. So it may not be money well spent by going with that extra cover treatment.
Especially with a very short run. So you mentioned short run several times. Why don't you, as a printer, define a short run and define the components of when do you think short run, and of course, we could say long run, but when do we go from digital to offset? And would you explain the difference between the two?
I sure will. The length of print run depends on the workflow or the tools that any given printer might be using. The two processes we're speaking of, digital is usually considered toner or inkjet printing technology. And then in the next stage, or when runs get a little higher, we are usually speaking about offset printing. But digital is used on print runs that are typically 500 to 600 copies or less, all the way down to a single copy. And we find that the difference between the print quality or integrity between offset and digital is very minuscule these days. It's the same materials are used, the same papers, the same cover stocks. So when you start out, the decision is, I don't know for sure whether I can sell 1,000.
Okay, Phil, hold that. Okay, hold that. We're going to come back on the digital and offset. We'll be right back. This is Judith Briles. It's your guide to book publishing.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these on the Rockstar Radio Network.
Since 1987, Color House Graphics has set the standard for quality book production. Whether you decide to print a small quantity of books or need a large print run, depend on Color House to help you. You'll receive professional help and advice the moment you reach one of our representatives. If you mention hearing about us on your guide to book publishing with Judith Briles, we will provide you a discount on the first order you place. To speak with a project manager, call us toll-free at 800-454-1916 or visit us at www.colorhousegraphics.com.
When Ned Thompson and Harry Shore started Thompson Shore in 1972, they believed employees with great character would make up the best company. They were right. They hired people who were not only experts in bookmaking, but who were obsessed with quality and delivering exceptional customer service. Almost 40 years later, Thompson Shore remains a 100% employee-owned company. Ned and Harry knew that successful customer projects are a direct result of empowered employees. We specialize in all books for large and small publishers, creating beautiful and well-made books. We're dedicated to pleasing our customers by making the experience a good one from start to finish. The personal touch we have with our customers allows us to be innovative in solving their most difficult challenges. Our platform also ensures that we can remain flexible to meet our customers' unique needs and expectations. Our marketing kit can create buzz for your title, enhancing the promotion of your book during infancy. When you need to test the market to gauge your future sales, we can provide digitally printed books that will transition seamlessly into a larger offset run. From ebook to hard copy to delivery, our skillful customer service teams are at the ready to answer your most pressing question. At Thompson Shore, we know that making the highest quality books requires more than just best technologies. It requires superior customer service, professionalism to the trade, and commitment to environmental and social values. With these standards of excellence in place, you can be sure that we will always help you put your best book forward.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask on the Rockstar Radio Network. Coming up, you'll hear more about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
Here we go back.
Just a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit.
All right, when we took the break, Phil and I were talking about digital versus offset, short run, long run. What's the difference? When do you use it? What it is? And there's also something else I want to bring up into this discussion, because when you think of a short run, you think POD. And as Phil said, is you come down to one book, that print on demand. CreateSpace is a print on demand. Lightning Source is a print on demand operation. In fact, a lot of these pay to publish operations, in fact, all of them are print on demand operations. It is not publishing. POD is not publishing. It is a method of printing, and it's digital, one at a time, or you could order 10, or you could order 100, but it's extraordinarily short run. So Phil, as we transitioned to the music, all of a sudden it was on top of us again. He's talking about, 500 books, 600 books or less. You're looking at probably a digital, and then you start transitioning and thinking offset. So let's go back to that, Phil, and I'm to the expert. Explain it to us novices.
Well, as far as the outcome of the books, we expect it to be very close. I think I touched on that before the break, that we don't expect the quality that the average person picking up an offset book or a digital book will really know the difference in the end. And what we try to do is get an understanding of how the publisher or author wants to use how they're selling and how they're initiating the first steps of their marketing plan. Quite often we have folks come to us thinking that they're going to sell 2,000 copies right off the bat. And maybe they are, and maybe they've done their marketing planning and have a great chance of selling several hundred books. But oftentimes we find that they really aren't sure. So we'll suggest a short run, and even though we know that that might not be the lowest unit cost, it will produce books that can be market tested. They could, meet initial demand, and then decisions can be made as to when to reprint. Even some we're finding are raising the price a bit to cover the cost of a shorter print run, understanding that their cash flow is going to improve. They can very easily complete updates, make edits, without waiting to sell a couple thousand books. We also utilize short run these days for special events. I have a client this morning that wants to have books in New York for a special event, and they want to print 2,000, but there's no way we can get 2,000 books to them by the end of the month. So we've suggested a short run, and probably 100 to 200 copies that can be printed from the same files, same materials, and delivered in time for the event, easily in time for the event. So because of the type of workflow that digital is, we cut a lot of steps out of the manufacturing process. We essentially take a file and drop it into a machine and have textbook blocks. We're printing a cover in parallel to that. We can have, within 5 days, we can have 200 or 300 books ready to ship. And so it really provides a good solution for quick turn, short notice book manufacturing.
So that's good information to have. So if you really are planning a 2,000 book run, but you are crunch time, which I get into sometimes, but we have a crunch time coming up, and really all you need is 200 books, really truly 200 books within 2 weeks. You can handle it.
Exactly.
And they can pop out.
It makes it very possible.
Phil,
Right.
Go. I was going to say, is there a season? Should authors know about any type of specific time crunches that printers routinely have more than other times of the year? For example, we have right now we're in the month of August. September is, although half the schools in the country go back to school, and I know you've been printing books and things for schools and things long before this. But is there a certain time of the year that there is a bigger crunch of printing of books than at other times? That one, that they can get maybe a speedier turnaround, and two, maybe a better deal because it's what we would call low season for like in travel?
Right, Judith, there is. And, while we see these traditional publishing cycles changing somewhat with the way the markets have evolved, typically, most of us are busier beginning in May through the month of September to address both the traditional trade publishing cycles, but also the educational book cycles, which for most end, by the time school starts in September. What we find after that is just a little bit of a lull through the end of the year into the first part of the new year. And usually that's a good time for us to be able to turn things quickly, but also get creative with, some incentives. And, look at the possibility of gang printing, for instance. If you've got more than one title and you need to reprint, most printers will look at the opportunity to consolidate titles together of like sizes, and printers are oftentimes willing to offer a better price for that. Not to mention that you will benefit from savings in freight costs.
All of those things, which is, I look at freight cost, and as you know, I will often get an alternative bid to see if I can undercut what you're quoting for our clients. I mean, I do that.
Sure.
And sometimes I succeed.
And absolutely, freight is a very important aspect of the overall cost, and I think that for many years people took it for granted that now, as freight costs have gone up, it is an important aspect, to be able to look at it and say, hey, look, if I do it this way, I can save a few dollars.
Well,
the
Phil,
other
we're talking about
part of that
costs.
is in the package.
The packaging? Is that what you said?
Packaging, utilizing some creative packaging techniques. In other words, ultimately, if you're going to distribute the books or fulfill the orders yourself, you're going to need to package the product or repackage it once the manufacturer delivers it to you. But but you might consider whether or not the manufacturer can help you prepackage before those orders arrive. If you're going to sell a lot of single copy books, you might even consider having the vendor prepackage a portion of the order for you, or put it in quantities that are convenient for you to handle and ship. The idea that we need to package to make the weight of a carton 40 pounds doesn't necessarily hold true if you're going to sell 20 books at a time and would prefer to have them packaged that way. I mean, it just makes sense to spend a few dollars more for the cartoning at our end, where we can buy it much more cost effectively, than to have to go out and find containers and spend the time to repackage it yourself. So it, again, one of those things to consider early. Maybe it's part of your marketing plan. Maybe it's the first discussion you have with the printer. How am I going to ship and meet market demand?
And a lot of them don't even think of that. That's great arenas to start with. Well, let me ask you this: let's talk about asking for pricing. And I know we've got 2 minutes before our final break here, but what are some of the key things that the key elements when one of our listeners is going to ask for, including specs to you? What do you need to know?
Well, the trim size is very important, and I think oftentimes we find that the book has been designed and there's a pre-established trim size involved. But perhaps the most important thing I think to consider is allowing the printer to provide their option for the papers that they stock. Try to use the printer's stock items. I think you'll find that any vendor you speak to, print vendor, will want to steer you to their stock text and cover papers. And the reason for that is they buy in large quantities. You're going to get a better price. The materials are on hand. Typically, it's going to be something that comes close to what you expect, and also will be suitable for the type of material you're printing. If it's just straight black and white and, you've got a lot of illustrations, then they will recommend a sheet that fits that criteria.
So you need to let them know you need to let them know if there's illustrations, if they're black and white illustrations. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Because if somebody said, well, I'd like this book to really bulk up, or I need a big spine, but I don't have many pages.
Good idea. Okay, we're going to come right back. Phil, hold that. We'll come right back up on the tips to get your specs from a printer. This is Judith Briles. My guest is Phil Knight, the Director of Sales for Color House Graphics.
This is your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles. And we'll be right back with more great information right after these on the Rockstar Radio Network.
Do you sell stuff? Do you want to sell books? Lots of them? If yes, you must take credit cards, the most widely used form of payment today. The Free Terminal has created a special program for your guide to book publishing listeners. No contract. All equipment is free. Extremely low rates and no termination fees ever. Contact Alan Dean at alan@thefreeterminal.com or call him at 303-668-6828. The Free Terminal has handled all credit card transactions for both Author You and Judith for over a year. Don't wait another day. Contact Alan at thefreeterminal.com or call 303-668-6828 and tell him you want the no contract Author You deal.
The book shepherding concept is simple. The publishing world is changing, and so must you. You need an experienced shepherd and a guide to partner with you as you create, strategize, develop, publish, and achieve your publishing goals. You can't do it alone without paying the price. You can spend your money creating a book that turns out to be so-so, or you can create a book that looks and feels classy, builds your brand, and is a financial success, a bestseller. It's your choice. You choose. You need the book shepherd. Publishing is riddled with obstacles, sometimes nightmares for the author. You don't need problems. You want solutions. Dr. Judith Briles will shepherd you through the maze and the chaos. At times, she's had to step in and rescue a book that has been sabotaged by a publisher or by a publishing service provider or sometimes even the author themselves. Judith Briles is the book shepherd if you want to create a book with no regrets. Give her a call today, 303-885-2207. That's 303-885-2207, or email her at judith@briles.com. By the way, Briles is spelled B-R-I-L-E-S. Follow Judith on Twitter at My Book Shepherd and on Facebook at The Book Shepherd.
At Total Printing Systems, customer service is our priority. We are located in Southern Illinois. Our employees have an average of 18 years experience and know that customer relationships are important to our continued success. We have been a short-run book printer for nearly 40 years and always stay at the forefront of technology. Our niche is from 1 to 5,000 copies. Today, we offer digital, black and white, and 4-color high-speed inkjet printing, a cost-effective way to introduce color into your short-run titles. We, of course, offer traditional offset printing as well. Bindery is done in-house, from adhesive case binding to PUR perfect binding to mechanical binding of all types, including side sewing. We provide warehousing, kitting, distribution, inventory management, a new print-on-demand facility, streaming browser-based ebooks, and bookstore. Call us at 1-800-465-5200 for a quote on your next book project. You can also visit our website at www.tps1.com.
Welcome back to your guide to book publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask on the Rockstar Radio Network. If you want to write and publish a book, if you want to be successful as an author, your guide to book publishing, everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask, is for you. Stay tuned and you'll hear about statistics, scenarios, and strategies on what to do now to get you published. So let's get back to the show. And here again is your host, Dr. Judith Briles.
All right, so for this edition of your Guide to Book Publishing, we're talking about printing, a critical factor for all authors. Do you go with a print-on-demand method, which is one book at a time, and it will be totally digital, or do we go with what the big boys do? And, you know, Phil, I have a question for you, is what are the big boys actually doing in their print runs? My guest is Phil Knight. He's the Director of Sales with Color House Graphics, which is one of the sponsors of your Guide to Book Publishing, and certainly has been someone I've had the pleasure of working with many, many times for not only some of my books, but for many of our clients' books. So we're talking about specs. And what should an author let a printer know? We started with it's important to know the trim size. And I will say right now for all of you listening, for a how-to, nonfiction, self-help, memoir book, 5 by 8 or 5.5 by 8.5 is the norm for what the bookstores want to see. That is the norm in the industry, not 6 by 9. Fiction is looking at 5.8, 5.5 by 8.5, and if you're doing hardback, you can go up to 6 by 9. But that's you really want to look at that very closely. And then Phil, you might have some other thoughts on that, but it's important to know what your trim size is. Phil mentioned it's critical to know about the paper stock, and it's always the most effective, cost-effective way is to use what is the print manufacturer's stock, and they have white stock. They have several variations of white. They have several variations of natural or cream, whatever they're going to call it. And it's critical to know the number of pages, total pages. That includes your title to the very end page. And Phil, I think you better introduce what a signature is right now.
Well, that's true, and a signature comes into play primarily for books that are printed on an offset press, because we're working with a large sheet and multiple pages are imposed or placed on that sheet. Whereas in a digital format, we go down into actually 2-page increments where the number of pages, the round number of pages doesn't need to be divisible in a signature format. And I don't want to get everybody confused here, but normally, let's just take a 32-page format or signature for an offset book. We'll ask that the book be designed so that the page increment is in increments of 8. So if you can divide it by 8 and make it even 8-page divisible by 8, you're going to be in good. You're going to be offering the book in the most efficient format for printing offset. And again, if you're going back to digital, and we're working in 2-page increments, something that we'll remind you of when we give you our quotes, and most printers will do the same. They will guide you and your designer to make sure that if you need to add a couple of blanks at the back, that the book is formatted in the most efficient manner. So it's important to know, and Judith, you mentioned all the front matter needs to be identified. That is, we count pages of a book by the number of images on each side of the sheet.
Yes,
sheet
and so
of paper in a book is considered 2 pages.
Yes, a blank page is a page. A blank, if you have your title page and it's blank on the back, that's 2 pages. So understand that. And why I brought that up is that one of the things that's ugly to me in books is when I look at a book and all of a sudden there is 7 blank pages in the back. And what Phil is talking about is these divisions by 8. And some of them are really even pissy saying 16. That's it, 16. And if you come into having 11 pages, you are going to get 5 blank pages. Or I guess you can go in and push it up to try to trim it back. But guess what? That's going to cost more money. Isn't that right, Phil?
It usually does. If we're working in an uneven format, or we force it to a smaller format, you're adding cost. And, some folks say it's worth it. We don't want to see the blank pages, but I think either consider adding some content, maybe some advertising to help fill some of those pages, or, try to add it to the point where you can eliminate some content and make it work. But it is all part of the cost equation. We're working with, large sheets of paper, and each of those represents a different process in the printing process, the binding process. So if we can reduce the number of different forms that we're working with, we lower the cost. So it's all part of what we would probably try to steer you to do if we can.
All right. And so what else do we need, Phil?
Well, one other aspect, Judith, is that we encounter once in a while when we're switching between digital and offset are bleed images, which are printed images that run right to the edge of the trim of the book. And we have to allow for a little larger sheet of paper when we're working with interior pages that have bleed. So, again, these will be part of the questions that most printers will ask, and it may make a substantial cost difference for some short-run books. If we go with a 6x9 book, for instance, that is with no bleeds as opposed to one that has bleeds, we can save 30 to 40% without the bleed. Mm-hmm. So, these are things that we can discuss, but they do come into play.
Okay, so we have trim. We've got paper, what kind of paper we're looking for. We need to know how many pages are in the total number of pages in the book. We need to know how many copies you're looking for, so you can quote this. We need to know if there's if any images are being bled. What else do we need to know?
Well, the binding styles are, we need to know if it's a softcover book, it's pretty straightforward. It's adhesive bound. We do get into other bind styles, hardcover, and there's a whole other series of questions that we'll ask if we're working with a hardcover edition, including a dust jacket, and then cover treatments for that.
And if you're going to, yep. And sheets, and then if you're going to print on the cover of the hard case too.
Exactly, print versus stamping. Again, you can apply foil, like we discussed for softcover books. Usually, we see the title and on the spine and front cover of a hardcover book with a dust jacket wrapped over it. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole different series of questions that come up with a hardcover book. And then, when we talk about cookbooks, we get into mechanical binding, which is spiral or wire binding, plastic coil. Again, we can help folks with those questions and help provide them with some examples if needed.
So the bottom line is know what you want, and I always send people down. I know we only have a couple of minutes here, but I always send people to a bookstore and look at current books, what's being produced, literally, what's being produced, what pops at you, what feels it. I want you to touch it. I want you to feel it. I want you to open these books. I want you to look at the images in them. I want you to look at how the chapters open. What sings to you, because that's all going to help, number one, the designer in the process, but also when you talk to the printer. And in my case, I usually do most of the talking to the printers for the clients, but I'm going to be talking to you about those things so I can clearly communicate with the printer. So all of those are critical. All those are critical. Okay, so let me see. What have we not covered? There's still lots of things. Phil, if you were to give, we have 2 minutes, give me typical mistakes you see, and how about a 1, 2, 3, what to do?
Well, one of the big mistakes that we see, and it's usually one that we can't correct, is that the printer wasn't involved in the I guess, design decisions in the first place. That we didn't actually have an opportunity to discuss perhaps more efficient options or material choices or formats, the trim sizes and so on. I think those are mistakes that we see, and I think the other thing is that we find people who haven't done a whole lot of research with regard to the whole process. There's just a world of information out there. Most printers' websites are packed with a lot of help geared toward the self-publisher or author, and if they could just get in there and. I'm sorry?
And so go to them. Go to colorhousegraphics.com and read through it and become educated, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
All right. And with that, we're going to have to say thank you, Phil Knight. We're at the wrap-up here of your guide to book publishing. A lot of information. We could probably do another hour on this and get into details, but go to his website. Certainly, it's highly recommended, and you need a good printer on your side to create a quality book. This is Judith Briles, your guide to book publishing. We'll be with you next week with more solid information to becoming a successful author.
Thank you for being a part of Your Guide to Book Publishing. Everything you want to know but didn't know what to ask. With your host, Dr. Judith Briles.